I had been wanting to start my own thing for a while, but I didn't know quite how to do it. But leaving CNN was the sort of the push that I needed to get me to do it.
Welcome to Living Not So Fabulously, where real talk meets real money with just enough flair to keep the lights on and the drama low interest.
So, David, quick question for you. When I say lemon drop, do you think of a martini or do you think of Don Lemon?
I don't know. I mean, I guess maybe a little bit of both. I mean, sipping on a lemon drop while getting served hot takes by Don Lemon, that's kind of the way we take our politics these days, isn't it?
Exactly. It's the only way you can get through, right? And now I'm thirsty. Don Lemon is an award-winning journalist known for his bold reporting and unapologetic truth-telling.
From Baton Rouge to CNN primetime, he's stirred headlines as often as he's delivered them. Whether challenging power or dancing in Sag Harbor, Don brings the truth and a little bit of glitter.
Welcome to the show, Don Lemon.
Hi, guys. Did you just say you're thirsty?
Yeah, well, he's somewhere, right?
No, I thought you meant like thirsty, like a thirst trap thirsty, but that's
no. That's a constant, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a G-rated
How are
show.
you guys doing?
We're doing well. Well, thank you so much for joining us. So we're going to go into the Wayback Machine here. Growing up in Baton Rouge, can you remember what were your earliest memories about money and financial security?
Well, look, kids don't know that they're poor. I wouldn't say I was poor, but you don't know what your parents' financial situations are, right? So I just thought that we were rich, right? And so, and then I didn't realize until I grew up and moved to New York City that oh, wait a minute, you were not rich. This is real wealth. But I just remember my mom working really hard, my dad working really hard, and we lived a great life. But they made us so comfortable that we thought that we were rich. But I quickly learned that once I got into the business world, once I left Louisiana, that I'd have to create my own wealth and hopefully generational wealth for the ones who come behind me.
Yes,
I love that. It is. I really appreciate that you said your parents tried to make you feel like you were rich, because my parents were just the opposite. And I know for me, it formed a scarcity mindset in my mind, because I would constantly hear, we don't have money for this, we don't have money for that. And that, especially during those early years, like 5 to 7 years old, I constantly heard that from my parents. It really does mess with your brain.
It can, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, money doesn't grow on trees. I mean, I heard that, you wanted certain things. Money doesn't grow on trees. Or do you think I work for the light company? Turn some of the lights off in here. Whatever. We heard all those things are you trying to cool the whole neighborhood with the air conditioning, close the door, or close the refrigerator? I heard that stuff. But they always tried to, at least take care of us, and they made us feel, even though sometimes some of the things coming out of their mouths were sort of contradictory of what they were saying,
Do you think that them trying to, you kind of living in this world where you felt rich, maybe informed you about the possibility of being successful, that was within your grasp?
Yeah. Well, yes. And the thing is, so for me as a person of color, growing up in Louisiana was different because it's a deep South, right? And there's lots of racism there. And so, we lived in segregated neighborhoods. And I lived in a neighborhood, quite frankly, that was kind of like the Black Leave It to Beaver neighborhood, or the Black Brady Bunch neighborhood, where the, lawns and sprinklers and that kind of thing, and, 2-car garages and all that. For me, it was different, because once I left my sort of bubble of living in an all-Black neighborhood, which I didn't realize was segregated. I just thought, Blacks lived here, whites lived there, whatever. I was just young. And then I went to LSU, and I realized that, or I went to high school, rather. I got out of private school and I went to high school, and I realized that, hey, things are different between, sort of Black wealth and white wealth, and middle class and upper middle class and all that. But I grew up in a neighborhood thinking, where folks who taught me that, hey, you're smart. And so I was used to sort of Black excellence. And then, then I started going to public school, and people were like, oh, you're pretty smart for a Black guy. And I'm like, what? And they were like, oh, your parents do pretty well for a Black people. And I'm like, what? And so, and then from there, I got my initiation into the real world.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So did you kind of rebel against those remarks? I mean, what would you say to people when they sort of compared you to that Black wealth versus white wealth?
At first it was like, kind of surprising to me because as I told you, where I grew up in this sort of Leave It to Beaver, where all of the black families were either professors at Southern University, which was a historically black college, a university in Louisiana. So I was used to it, and I like looked at them or thought like, "Are you guys nuts? Did you not know this?" And so after a while, I did not have to say anything to them. I just sort of was myself and made them get used to me.
Mhm.
And there were others like me, but the high school I went to private school, Catholic school, until I got to high school, and I was tired of going to Catholic school. And so I went to a public high school that had just been desegregated like maybe a decade before I went. So there was lots of
Wow.
learning curves for everyone. And this was the 80s, and it had just been
Yeah.
desegregated like in the early 70s. So, you know, it was pretty, it was weird to hear it, but then times were different then.
Right.
I don't know
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
old
No
you guys
doubt.
are. You're a lot younger than me, so you probably didn't have to deal with anything like that.
You're
No.
fine. They don't have an ultra on.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. So if you're just joining us, this is Living Not So Fabulously, the show where we keep it authentic, entertaining, and a little fabulous while we talk about money. We're talking with Emmy Award-winning journalist Don Lemon about some of his personal money stories.
And if you're watching on YouTube, drop a comment below and maybe share what your experience was as a child growing up in your household. Did your parents talk about money? And how did they talk about money? So, Don, I'm going to continue this idea of the Wayback Machine. You you started your career in Birmingham and then moved to Philadelphia. So there's a question that I really would like to have answered. I think everyone has this perception that everyone on TV is like rolling in the dough. Can you give us a perspective of what it was like in those early years? What was your earning power like? I mean, to be honest, John and I live in a very average neighborhood, and the woman two doors up from us is on TV in the mornings. And so I think it's kind of, we kind of have that perception. Oh, you're on TV, you're rolling in it. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, not necessarily now, what's happening with media. But let me just take you back. You said in Birmingham, that was my first full-time on-camera job. I started in television in New York City, working for $5 an hour, which was below the poverty level in New York City. And it was, this was back in the early 90s. And I started as a trainee in the newsroom, basically answering phones, opening mail, and, going to get dry cleaning or lunch from the loading dock for the higher ups. And so, and it was only a 6-month thing. And so I lived in a sublet in Queens in someone's back room. And my parents had to help me pay the rent even then. So you don't make a lot of money when you're starting out. And then eventually the first full-time on-camera job I got was I did okay, but it was meager. I lived in a studio apartment in Birmingham, Alabama, and then just sort of worked my way up. But when you're in those lean years, when you're starting, you really make no money. And then
Mhm.
once you get to, maybe to be an anchor in the local markets, they do very well. And then you get to a network where you start to make more money. But there's a difference between, as you guys know, being rich and being wealthy, right? Being
Mhm.
able to afford to pay your bills and having a little bit extra. Some people would call that, upper middle class, or some folks would call that rich. But very few people become wealthy in these television jobs until you get to a certain level where the air is really rarefied. You don't really make that much money in media on television.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked
That's
at a
why that's why
statistic
a lot of men. That's why I'm sorry to cut you guys off. That's why a lot of, especially heterosexual men who believe that they have to take care of the entire family, a lot of them don't go into this business. There are a lot of gay men in the business, and it's sort of saturated or populated with women. Um,
Mhm.
uh, Sadly, unfortunately, because of how women have been treated in society, but also because people look at men traditionally in America as the breadwinners, and you don't make a lot of money. It's hard to afford to be able to take care of a family, children and all that when you're in going through the ranks in television.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
enlightening.
Yeah, I looked up a statistic earlier before the show. I think that the average nationwide for a news anchor is 45,000 in local markets, and that is below the median income for the people in the United States, right? So it's not this
Mhm.
lucrative job that all of us think. Although you did have some great opportunities, right? You ended up going on to NBC and CNN, having those kind of milestones in your career. Were there any financial moves that made doing that easier?
Um, yeah, learning to live within your means. And look, I think I came through, I was lucky. My timing was good because each job I went to, I made more money. And you
Mm,
have contracts, so you know how much money you're going to make. You know the minimum amount of money you're going to make. So you figure out, you get a budget and you figure out like, okay, I can save this amount of money and then still afford to live. But I have to be honest, until I got to really to CNN, I did not have a financial advisor or anyone like that. And once I got to
Mm.
CNN, I started to make some real money. Then I got a
mhm,
financial advisor and I started to sock away money, but mostly not just like put it in the bank, but actually have real investments. And that's when you realize, oh, this is how people accumulate wealth. This is how people,
mhm.
get to take themselves out of poverty.
Yeah. So Americans in general struggle with lifestyle creep. As our incomes grows, typically our lifestyle grows as well. And from the folks that we've worked with and interviewed for our podcasts over the years, gay men struggle with that especially, trying to prove that, we were worthy despite how we were maybe treated in high school, in grade school. How did you avoid that lifestyle creep and get into the mode like, all right, I'm now earning more money. Now I'm going to start budgeting.
And investing.
Oh God, I don't know if I ever got over it, but look, I started to I the thing was is that I never really had to worry because again, I was lucky and I knew how much money I was making. And so my salary always afforded me, for the most part, afforded me the opportunity to be able to live a certain lifestyle. But I think it's just living within your means. So when I worked in local, I didn't go out and buy $1 million apartment or $1 million home. I bought
Mhm.
the type of home, the type of property that suited my income. And again, the timing was different for me because people coming up now, younger people coming up, they don't get to invest in homes and property and real estate the way that we did because it's so expensive now, right?
Right,
It used to be, I think,
right.
like 3 times your salary that you could, whatever, the average home, and now it's like 6 times your salary or something like that. I didn't really have to deal with that. It was always frightening to me. The first time I bought a home, I was like, I have to put out that much money. How am I going to pay this mortgage? And right. And but most of it, for most Americans, the biggest wealth that they accumulate is through their homes, right? Through
Right.
home ownership. So that concerns me about the folks coming up now because you really can't do that. I have been lucky. So now let's just say that everything falls apart. I can always sell. This is my home. I can always sell this apartment and live for quite a while. And
Mhm.
the only reason that I can do that is because over time I've been able to take one home and trade up to another and trade up to another and trade up to another. And so sometimes the homes that I was able to buy or live in may have been how do I say this? Above the salary range, but because I was able to get in that home ownership at at the bottom level, I was able to take that big chunk and put it into the down payment, which made
Mhm.
my monthlies on being able to afford a mortgage cheaper. So let's just say I'm just making up a number that it was a $200,000 home. And
Yeah.
maybe my salary allowed me to for a $90,000 home. I could live in a $200,000 home only because I was lucky in real estate, which is where most people have their income and their assets. I was lucky to get in at a time where it was affordable for people, and then all of a sudden, real estate values went. But I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know
Awesome.
what happens now. I don't know how people afford to live now and to buy homes. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. But thank you for sharing that strategy.
Yeah, just a couple of points. The reason why I did the between you and me thing to John was I remember when we wrote the check for the down payment on our very first home, I was like, it was $11,000. And I said, that is the largest check I've ever written in my life. And today people spend that kind of money on vacations, right? Um,
Y-
but
Right?
I also appreciate you talking about this kind of moving things,
Scaling.
scaling things up, because I think a lot of people think, well, I have to buy my forever home with my very first home. And sometimes I think that mentality prevents people from actually
No.
getting into the market.
Right. And look, also I'm lucky too. My husband is a real estate agent. So, he knows the deals and he's like, this is a time that we should buy. And this is a great place to buy because in this area, the homes are going to go up. So I've been very lucky to do that. But again, yeah, I think I forget what my first down payment was for my home, and I was scared. I was like, all of that money was draining out of my bank account, and
It's
I'm like, "What am
always
I gonna
scary.
do? What if this happens? What if this happens?" And yeah, I mean, I was counting like the to the penny, right?
Yeah.
And how much, but you got to take that plunge because if you don't,
Yeah.
then you don't get to afford a home. But also, you guys know things are changing now. People feel like they don't have to buy homes. We live in a shared economy, and a lot of
Yeah.
people are
Right.
renting. And there are some financial advisors that'll tell you it's better to rent than to buy at certain moments, in with the economy.
100%.
Definitely.
Please hold that thought, Don. We'll be right back after this quick break. Welcome back to Living Not So Fabulously. We're sitting here with journalist Don Lemon. So, Don, we're going to pivot just a little bit here. What motivated you to launch the Don Lemon Show, and how did you approach that from a financial planning perspective to take that kind of a gigantic, career leap?
Well, one, CNN gave me the boot. But I had been wanting to start my own thing for a while, and I had been seeing the way media was going, and again, I had been lucky enough to be in media for a while and to be able to accumulate some wealth. But owning a business and starting a business is really, really expensive. There's lots of overhead. I had never had employees before. You got to pay salaries, you got to pay health insurance, you have to, pay studio costs and all kinds of things. So, I was able I was fortunate enough to be able to have my own seed money, and not everyone can do that. So again, I
Nice.
understand that I
Yeah.
have a privilege in a certain way that I can do that. But so I realized it's like, you know what? I can either just sit and not work for a while or possibly forever, to be honest. And I said, I don't want to do that. And so now I've invested money into the business. And when you start, you make a lot of mistakes. I think I spent way too much money in the beginning on doing things that I didn't necessarily need. But whoopsie, you live and you learn. And that's what happens in business. So I've learned to scale the business to a place where it is affordable, practical, and profitable. And that takes a while. So I had been wanting to start my own thing for a while, but I didn't know quite how to do it. But leaving CNN was the sort of the push that I needed to get me to do it.
So sometimes, what seems like a mistake or a failure or whatever, however you want to define it, is your biggest opportunity.
Yeah, look, I don't say, look, it depends on a mistake or a failure or whatever, but I look at everything as an opportunity. Sometimes you're just, God or the universe will say, you need to move on. This is not, you don't need to be here. Just kick you out, and then you figure out what to do. But I think people can either get stuck in, and become bitter or mad and say, oh my gosh, how dare they do this to me? Or you can say, you know what? Now what do I do with this opportunity that I'm presented with? And that's what I did. And I chose, especially the election was also a major motivator for me because I wanted to have a voice and impact in the election. And and I said, even if I just get to do that until after the election, then I'm totally fine with that. And so it just so happens that I did it during the election, and people started tuning in, and they're like, "Oh my God, your Man on the Street stuff is great. I watch your YouTube show. The memberships and the subscribers, the subscriptions like grew." And I'm like, "Oh, well, this is happening. This is better than I thought." But here's the catch: if you're doing this independent media thing, which a lot of folks will have to do, is that you need sponsors and advertisers to stay afloat. And many advertisers do not like to advertise around politics and news because they feel it's not brand safe. I think it's crazy. You got to take a stand, as we were talking about, with businesses, et cetera, corporations, as it relates to Pride Month and all of that. But eventually, I became too big for advertisers and sponsors to ignore, and so now they're signing on, and so we're getting sponsors and advertisers. So you just have to keep on trucking. So yeah,
Nice.
this is an
Congrats.
opportunity for me.
I love that.
June is Pride Month. It's also World Pride in DC this month. So what would you give when you look at the LGBT community, especially with what we're going through right now? What would you give as one piece of financial advice that you would think everyone should try to do, whether it's personal or business?
And you're talking about specifically for members of the LGBTQ plus community,
Right?
Yes, please.
to the gays.
Yeah.
Look, I would say just very simple advice: save some money. Put some money away. Invest in your money. Don't invest in the market if you can, and don't try to keep up with the Joneses. We always try to keep up with the Joneses, and everybody's out there. They're buying and they're fabulous and they love luxury and all of that. I am not. One thing that has saved me is that I don't really care about luxury. I don't care about brands. Of course, do I love to look at a beautiful Louis Vuitton bag and all of that? Do I love Hermes? Do I love, all right? I love all of that. I love it. But guess, you know what I love more than that? I love opening up my phone and going, oh, look at my bank account. Huh, interesting. So I don't have to have a name brand or a label on my back, and I don't have to go out and drink or stay at the same hotels as you or make sure that I have an Uber. I ride the subway. I'll jump on a taxi.
Nice.
I'll get on a city bike. And so I would just say, don't worry. People who actually have money don't do those things. I would say just save your money. Do not try to keep up with the Joneses. F other people if they don't like what you're wearing. They don't have to wear it. F other people if they don't like your little one-bedroom apartment, a studio apartment. Be jealous of my bank account and don't worry about where I live.
Exactly.
I did not have getting fashion tips on my bingo card from Don.
But invest in your home. Invest in your home, invest in your business, invest in yourself. Don't invest in things, just things because. Don't I have to have I have to have a beautiful crossbody designer bag. I don't really care.
Nice. Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Did that answer your
We
question?
really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today, Don. We really appreciate it.
You guys
Thanks
are
for
great.
tuning
I
in.
love it. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Definitely. If you like what you see, scan the QR code and follow Yahoo Finance Podcast for more videos and expert insights, because when you do, you feel a little bit more financially empowered too. And until next time, stay fabulous.
This content was not intended to be financial advice and should not be used as a substitute for professional financial services.